What is up, Fragrance family? We are live, guys. It is Saturday night. It's technically Sunday morning now, 1 a.m. My time. I don't know. It may be different wherever you are. Welcome to the show. We are looking at Acqua Di Gio Profumo. This is the special blend, and then we got this decant that we're looking at. So let's get into the notes. Okay, as many of you know, guys, the original blend, just regular Acqua Di Gio Profumo, dropped in 2015, and then 2 years later, in 2017, Profumo Special Blend dropped. And I think it's fair to say that for all practical purposes, they're about 95% identical. I would just say they're about maybe 4 to 5% different, if that makes sense. Maybe even less by some people's standards, but differences I would think is that a friend of mine wears Profumo, the original, and I quite like that a lot. I think it has a little richer, natural, more aquatic vibe or note to it. I do think that Special Blend smells uh, just a tad less aquatic. It still has that DNA, of course, but it smells a little bit more. Smells ever so slightly darker, if that makes sense. More of a noir version. It smells a little bit funkier. I don't want you to take that in the wrong way, but for some reason, the patchouli in this seems ever so slightly either amped up or smokier. And I don't know, some people say that this smells a little sweeter than the first one. I'm not sure I quite buy that. I think it's just the fact that, again, the original to me has more of that pure aquatic vibe going on, almost like a cool water, albeit a classier version. Of course, I think Davidoff's Cool Water was absolutely the bomb when it dropped way back when. And when was that? 90, 95, 94, 91, something like that. Way, 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 way back when. But I do think, this is a classy scent. And I kind of didn't want to like this for whatever reason because it really, really took off on the hype train. They both did. Acqua Di Gio and then Acqua Di Gio Profumo and then Acqua Di Gio Profumo Special Blend. So I've been wearing this for about 30 minutes and close to 30 minutes. And I have reapplied as well. So let's get into the notes and then we'll talk about what I think about this. And again, I got this from a very, very super trusted source online. Very cool, very sizable decant that will last me probably for a couple of years because of my rotation. Let's see, briefly, anybody online? Not yet. Okay, well, maybe we'll get some visitors down the road. I don't know. Okay, notes are C notes, bergamot. Middle is geranium, rosemary, and sage. Base notes, patchouli, and incense. And I'm going to be quite frank, I don't get a whole ton of incense. I mean, yes, it's in here, but it's very subdued. It's very mild. I don't think the incense is. I've smelled way more incense and a lot of niche perfumes that just annihilate this in terms of incense quality and incense power or the amount. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. Whatever. It is a note. Bergamot in here is quite pronounced. The C notes are obvious, but not overdone. The geranium is very obvious, but it's so well blended along with the rosemary and sage. And the patchouli, again, to me, it's earthy. It's a little bit smoky, a little bit funky, a little bit pungent. But that's what we pretty much expect from patchouli in general. I think this is a very versatile scent. It's arguable by some that it's not quite as versatile as the original because the original, again, is just that classic, almost sporty, aquatic, classy scent. And I do think this version here, it carries most of that intact, but I think somehow it comes off smelling a little tiny bit more formal, a little bit more noir. I think more of a nighttime signature type scent. You certainly don't have to rock it only at night, but you probably will mostly use it for special events and evenings out. Whereas I think the original blend is, again, can be easily a day scent, a work scent, office scent, whatever. I mean, not that it's limited to those rules, but I do think it's a bit more versatile. Okay, price point. Obviously, this was a limited special run. I think this only maybe cost, I don't know, maybe an extra $20, I want to say, a bottle. Not that much more, just a little bit. Somewhere like that, 20 or 30. I forget. Well, now you can find this on some discounter websites and specialty resellers. I don't know what the exact going price is right now. I don't think it's anything special or spectacular. And there are still a lot of bottles out there available for those of you that are interested. Let me read you some of the comments online from some of the users, and you can decide where your experience lines up with these guys, or if you think differently than they do. We can kind of bounce some ideas back and forth and go from there. So one guy writes, and I'm just going to paraphrase because I don't have time to read every last word. One guy says, if you already have the ADG Profumo original, don't feel like you're missing out on this one. It's 99%, if not more, the same thing. People try to act like it's superior to have this one, but they're most likely stroking their own ego, blah, 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 blah. Both are great. Don't spend more on the special blend, though, just because of the hype. And he claims to have owned both and sold special blend for money, whatever. I disagree that these are 99% identical. Again, I've smelled the original. To me, it's significantly more aquatic. It's a little bit lighter. And I hate to say it, but it almost has a slightly classier vibe to it. I don't know how that means, but I'm starting to almost feel that the original Profumo is actually the slightly more formal yet very versatile scent, and this one to me seems like the more casual version of that. If that, I know that sounds antithetical or whatever, anti logical, but that's just my personal opinion. At any rate, another guy writes that this is a patchouli that was sourced from Guatemala as part of an ethical sourcing program, and this was done by the house, the gigantic behemoth fragrance house Firmenich. And again, the gold accents on the bottle are meant to sort of represent that aspect of the program. And they really like the dry down, and they believe that the patchouli and incense really shine through during the dry down. But that otherwise, it's very, very, for the most part, nearly identical to the original. Some differences there, obviously. Strangely for me, I find that I like the opening significantly better than the development phase and the dry down. That's just my personal opinion. I think that the opening is richer and more vibrant, and it's more impactful, and it's got more sizzle. And for me, when it dries down, a lot of the notes just kind of blend almost too well together and just become kind of mass layer, if you will, that doesn't really do a whole lot more than just a couple of things, if you will. I think that the opening has a lot more dimension, a lot more character. And I do wish, I'm not sure if Morillas redid this one. I think he did. I'm pretty sure I know he did the original Profumo. But at any rate, whoever or whatever did this sort of flanker later edition, just 2 years later, I believe. I kind of wish they'd gone off the rails, if that makes sense. I wish they'd driven off a cliff and really just amped everything up, amped up the spice, amped up the patchouli, amped up the sea notes, amped up the bergamot, added a couple more notes, way, way amped up the incense. And I would just be saying this is probably the greatest perfume in the world, or one of them. I tend to like stronger, bolder fragrances. But having said that, there is a certain elegance in the restraint used in these types of designer scents that are meant to be very mass appealing. And obviously, if you amp up something to level 11, a la Spinal Tap, you probably aren't going to be appealing to the masses anymore. So I more than get that aspect of it, but I do think that They could have really gone quite a bit harder and made something a lot more spectacular, if that makes sense. Having said that, it's an excellent designer flanker or special edition, however you want to say it. If you already own the original, do you need this one? No, you definitely do not. But at the same time, it is a little bit different. So if you are a huge fan of Armani in general, and especially the Acqua Di Gio line, you may want to get your nose on this and give it a shot. Again, it didn't cost a whole heck of a lot more than the original, and I don't think it costs all that much now. I mean, if you're into upper level designer frags, this is not going to break your bank account. Uh, I don't know, JD. Thank you for joining me here on the live. JD Matthews writes, "Who wins more compliments?" And then 1 to 10, what do you give it overall? I don't know, JD. I'll be quite honest with you. I normally don't give numerical rating values on my channel to fragrances. I can as I don't know when you joined the live, but I'll just reiterate that I've smelled both for quite some time, and I think that me personally, I prefer the original. Not by a country mile. I just think it smells a little more timeless, a little classier, a little bit more aquatic, but it has this sort of sweet, clean, classy vibe to it. I can't really explain it different than that, but I find that this one to me, strangely enough, seems a little bit more casual, a little bit funkier, a little bit darker. It's still very similar. Don't get me wrong. Still excellent for sure. I'm not throwing shade at this edition at all. It's excellent, but I'm finding that I'm actually preferring the original for whatever reason. There are certainly many people out there that are absolutely to the contrary. They prefer this edition, and they think it's about 2 points. To your point, a lot of the online vloggers have given the original 8 or 8.5 out of a 10, and they've given this edition a perfect 10. Is this a perfect 10 in my book? Not even close. I'm I'm probably a very harsh critic and judge when it comes to perfect 10s, and I think a lot of that is just the emotion of the moment and getting caught up in a fragrance that we just come to adore and think that we can't live without. Oh, it's incredible. This is excellent. The original is excellent. It's going to really boil down to personal taste. They're both going to garner a ton of compliments for sure. But I would think that the original might do a little bit better in the compliment sector just in terms of the masses. But I think since their DNA is so overall quite similar, again, with some of those differences I pointed out earlier, I do think that special edition may not get you. It will get compliments certainly. It may not get you quite as many as the original edition, and that's true of most flankers. Sadly, they tend to be really interesting alternate versions of their original selves in a sense. Rarely do they outshine their original formulations. I'm not saying never, but just in general, they tend not to. Uh, Guys, if you have any other requests for perfumes, colognes, EDTs, EDPs, or matchups or comparos, please feel free to hit me up or chime in on a live or send me a text, a shout out via YouTube, or you can look me up on Facebook and shoot me a message. Be glad to take those requests. And can't get them all as quickly as we'd like, but I will promise to try to get to those in a timeful manner if possible. Uh, yeah, JD's asking, do I think the original was reformulated? Not that I know of offhand. Again, this is not the original. It's just the special edition. A friend of mine rocks the original, and to my nose at least, it smells identical as it did back when it dropped in 2015. If there was a change, it is so ultra minute. I can't tell any difference whatsoever. I know he rocks the 20. I'm not sure if he rocks a 2017 or a 2015 bottle. That I'm not sure on. But I've smelled another guy that rocks the 2017 batch, and it absolutely smelled fantastic. So to my nose, at least, I would say they smell more or less identical. I wouldn't worry too much. Most of the designer houses, like Armani, they tend not to do reformulations that mean anything, simply because they've been. Don't take this the wrong way, guys, but they've been synthetic for so long. There's typically just not a need to reformulate, because they've moved out of organics for so long in most cases. There's just no need to reformulate, other than perhaps if you would think they're trying to cut costs on certain higher dollar synthetic molecules. That may or may not be possible. Sometimes manufacturers come out with a new synthetic molecule that apes or copies the exact signature smell of a previous higher dollar version. So to that extent, but in general, they don't really do that a whole lot, because the reason is they love to use absolutes. And when they use an absolute, they tend to jack up the price anyway, and then they boldly announce this is patchouli absolute, or da 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 special blend, or da 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 platinum, harvested on top of Mount Everest. So I wouldn't worry a whole lot, guys, about reformulations. A lot of that is absolutely overblown to the nth degree. I think where it matters a lot more is if you're dealing with organics, or if you're comparing something that came out in 1970 as opposed to 2011 or 2017 or what have you. There, especially when they're the same editions, like some of the Chanels, some of the really old Armanis back from the 70s, some of the really old Robert Piguet stuff, and on and on and on. Even some of the old Paco Rabanne stuff from the 80s is absolutely not the same juice being made today, even though they have the same title and the same overall sort of olfactory signature scent, if you will, but they're clearly not the same DNA exactly, because those are massively reformulated. So I would just say time is a huge factor. If we're dealing with a 10-year spread, of course there's going to be reformulations usually. If you're dealing with 30 years, of course we all know there's been reformulations in those cases. Only exception maybe is high-end natural organic perfume makers that specialize, and always use organic. Of course, those cannot be shipped internationally in most cases. So let's see. Is it Mike? MSB Tough. I think it's Mike, if I remember right. 100 Pepper, and I'm watching you. He says he's sitting in a bar with 100 people surrounding him, and he's watching me live and can't even hear what I'm saying. That's pretty hilarious. Mike, catch me later when you get home, buddy. Sorry about that. A bar setting is definitely not the place to watch a fragrance review or anything quiet in general. Apologies, but yeah, try to catch me later on the when you get home, I guess, or get to work. JD writes, that's sort of true because Invictus Aqua was reformed this year. Yeah, and Paco Rabanne has been notorious over the last 20 something years, maybe 30, if we're being honest, reformulating virtually every 2 to 4 years. They'll come out with flankers, and then they'll redo along the way. They'll redo the originals, and they all do it. I'm not throwing shade at the House of Paco Rabanne. They're all guilty as charged. But at the same time, like I'm saying, though, if you're talking about a much more recent frag like Armani's Acqua Di Gio, the time factor is just so small. I wouldn't personally see the point in reformulating that rapidly. It's not impossible, certainly just not that likely. And again, especially with a house like Armani, they go the extra mile to make sure that when and if they do reformulations, they tend to smell very, very nearly identical to the originals, much like the House of Creed. But let's not open a can of worms, because some people claim that, how dare you, the older Creed smell entirely different from the later Creed. I don't know. I mean, the House of Creed sources a lot of semi-organics in their perfumes, and so I think that's not so much them reformulating as it is simply they get different batches, right? And so if you think about high-end bourbons and whiskeys, of course, different batches taste and smell ever so slightly different. There are certain nuances there that are different. But I've smelled several different batches. For example, from the House of Creed of what's their almighty Aventus. I've smelled at least three different batches of Aventus, and to me, I really couldn't. At first, I thought I could, and then once I got to the dry down, I couldn't really smell any difference at all. They smelled virtually identical. That's just my experience, of course. I'm just one individual. I'm not claiming that's a rule for everybody out there. I'm sure there are better noses than mine that can detect perhaps some kind of meaningful difference. But for me, I haven't smelled the difference. And I'm going to wrap it up, guys. If there are no more questions or requests, so last chance to get those in, or we're going to wrap for the evening. Thank you again for joining me here live. It's been quite fun talking about something I'm very late on getting on, Acqua Di Gio Profumo Special Edition. Obviously, this is nothing new. It is an excellent scent. If you are a huge fan of the Armani line, and you are like someone that likes smoky, incensey, aquatic type perfumes or colognes, definitely get your nose on this. But if you already own the original, again, as I was saying earlier, I kind of like it just a tiny bit more. But that's just this is excellent. This is definitely excellent. So if you've got a few bucks lying around, burning a hole in your pocket, either get your nose, get a decant as I did. Where's the size of this? Let's see. Where did I put that? Did it fall down? I think it's, yeah, here we are. So I got this for a very reasonable price. Again, this will probably last me 2 to 3 years, probably. I mean, I have a massive rotation. So in all honesty, this is going to probably last me a minimum of 2 to 3 years, maybe longer if I'm not cray with my usage. But it is an excellent scent, so who knows? I might just start blasting it. I run out in 6 months. Such is life. Anyways, thanks again, guys. Spray often, spray well. Again, hit me up if you have any other requests. If you want to do some live matchups, some head-to-heads, some bracket divisions, we can talk about ideas or requests. I'll be glad to field those again in order, and I'll try to get to those requests as soon as I can. Anyways, that's going to do it. Join me next time, whenever that may be. Maybe tomorrow, maybe later on tonight. I don't know yet. Spray often, spray well. Live life to the fullest because life's too short. And live it on your terms. Love you guys. Please click the bell. Subscribe for future updates. And I will see you hasta la próxima vez. Ciao. That means goodbye.